Shinobi, warrior of the night. Trained to use the darkness of the shadow. I know your arts as well. But I have been trained to use the light.
Doing a lot of yammering, but unbeknownst to you, you're speaking your final words.
Shadow plants in Plants vs. Zombies 2 are strangely unique. Instead of sticking to one gimmick like stealthing themselves or committing bioterrorism, they are instead all over the place with their abilities, and are represented with their own shadow family, being the Concealmint, and are the smallest family in the entire game with only 11 members, one of which being the Moonflower, who on top of buffing every other shadow plant, is the only sun producer in the game not considered as a member of Enlightenment. Lastly, the majority of all shadow plants don't show up on the roster until the final world, being likely ignored by most as they probably already have a more defined strategy at that point. However, what if shadow plants were the first plants you were to use, and instead were restricted to using only members of the shadow family for the entire game? Thus, we can ask ourselves the question, can you beat Plants vs. Zombies 2 with only shadow plants? So first let's define the parameters of this challenge, and unlike my other Plants vs. Zombies challengers, like with summoners and parasites, this one is comparatively simple and easily defined in that I am only allowed to use shadow plants, or in other words, plants from the Concealmint family. Though, also, as an added personal challenge, I'm not going to immediately give myself the whole Concealmint arsenal, and instead slowly work my way up to using the whole team, so it remains interesting early game. That being said, let's move on to the rubric tiers of doability if we forgot. Tier 1, the challenge is completely doable with no buffs, power-ups, or leveled up plants, and I'm able to fully beat the game with only shadow plants. To Tier 2, the challenge is mostly doable. I beat it, but I had to level up one of my plants or something. Tier 3 is the challenge is somewhat doable if I have to buy plant food or boost one of my plants for a mission. And Tier 4, if I have to use power-ups or any non-shadow plants, I actively failed the challenge. Lastly, all levels in this game that lock me out of completing it using only shadow plans, such as pre-picked plant days, boss waves, ultimate battles, conveyor belt missions, gimmicks, and where it just forces a certain sun production type on me, are all not counted due to the impossible nature of them. Thus, these sections will largely be talked over from one mission. And with that being said, we got started on the challenge, with our first shadow plant being the weakest shooter I could think of, the Nightshade. Now, as stated in my Parasites Only challenge, the first 5 days of Ancient Egypt are automatic wins regardless of what you do, due to infinite respawning lawnmowers, and the game's general leniency of earlier waves, so I just more so use these first 6 days as a stock to get a general feel of what awaits me. Shadow plants are not typically seen as particularly weak or pathetic plants, but without Moonflower, some of them can easily get a bit on the abysmal side. But also, almost half of these plants are considered endgame, so even without Moonflower or a cognizant strategy, most of them can still at least do something. And the best example of this is the first plant I picked, Nightshade, who is basically a little shotgunner. Nightshade Unpowered functions similarly to Charred Guard in the sense that it only has 3 attacks, and only attacks when its target is right next to it. However, instead of knocking them back, it just does a fairly strong heavy attack, capable of one-shotting basic zombies. However, and our big problem with them comes up almost immediately, is that it takes all 3 shots to take out a single Conehead, and even a Camel Tablet zombie as well, meaning we are going to need to consistently recycle as well as tactically using our plant food to give it 3 super attacks, breaking down the Camel zombie waves. Early on, this isn't too much of an issue, but the torch zombie certainly will be, though. With the torch that instantly destroys most plants, and the only way for me to hit it is far away with plant food, the plus side is that the Nightshade has just enough time to get a single attack in before it gets burned, meaning I can quickly dig it up after it fires, and letting the Nightshade behind it fire a second shot, finishing it off. Not the end of the world with this one, but just like the upcoming Tomb Raiser, still a pain in the ass. And day 11 was a pre-picked plants wave. Ew, cringe! Nightshade was capable of getting the job done, even for armored opponents, but it didn't subtract from the annoyingness of having to constantly micro-shovel and replant them early on. Day 13 was don't plant on the mold colonies, but since the Nightshades already have the range of Charred Guard trying to get hard, it wasn't that big of a deal for me, moving right along. Day 14, the Tomb Raiser zombie finally decides to make itself known with how annoying it plans to be for the rest of Egypt by tossing a bunch of awful sandstone sculptures everywhere that no RimWorld trader wants to buy. Day 15 is protect the endangered plants, but since the endangered plants are sunflowers, it just translates to more nightshades for me, and I can less guiltily use used up ones as cannon fodder. Day 16 was more of the same with a little bit of everything, but since there's not too much armor, and there was an excess of plant food so that the nightshades could fire into the crowd's armor a bit better, made this pretty easy. Day 17 was a threat of not having more than 14 plants, but in all honesty, seeing as to how much I already need to recycle my nightshades into my shovel wood chipper every 10 seconds, it probably would have been harder for me to try and have 14 plants at once.
Why isn't it possible?
It's just not.
Why not, you stupid bastard?
Day 18 was the first plan your defense mission that I failed the first time, not because I actually failed it, but because I accidentally clicked the shock torture power-up, prompting an automatic restart. Anyways, plan your defense mission potentially pose a huge threat to this challenge, considering shadow plants can only be powered by moonflowers, and since moonflowers are sun producers, you can't use them in these missions. Fortunately, early on, the solution is pretty bird brain, but I do predict this will come back to stab me later on. For now, though, I just spammed nightshades, replanted them when I could, and bada boom, the lawnmowers dealt with anything that I didn't. Day 19, no more than 16 plants and mold colonies, but they didn't even bother bringing a Tomb Raiser zombie or a Buckethead with them, so once again without issue. Day 20 is more free sunflower slave labor, though once again, fortunately didn't bring a Tomb Raiser, so my only concern was making sure the torch zombies didn't get there in time, as it's worth bringing up that the plus side of Nightshade is that it won't attack tombstones intentionally unless it's plant fooded and can actually shoot over them, to a certain extent. However, the real issue comes with the area blocking, as the Tomb Raisers are causing us to lose a ton of ground, which is vital for the Nightshades to deal with more armored opponents, especially the Pharaoh, who forgot his Exo-2 Enclave power armor at home, so he had to compromise with becoming a vomit coffin. Moving even further down the challenges, kind of just ramp up a little bit with just combining other aspects like the mold colonies, though once again none of these are particularly harmful to my strategy, especially this early on, and we're able to fight through pretty much everything they throw at us, with me even opting to take down the Gargantuar on day 23, even though we could have just lawnmower him, just to say that I did. With day 24 being another plan your defense with enough money to cover the whole map in nightshades, and since this wave also didn't contain any long camels, this one was even less dangerous, with me able to beat the wave on my first try with the most crayon munching strategy imaginable, though this is also the only one considering I'm only using Nightshade right now. But with all I had to do left was aggressively flirt with Dr. Zombos until he shits himself, we were done with ancient Egypt. Starting out, Pirate Sea's obligatory easy first day doesn't really bring anything noteworthy to it, with even the rope-swinging pirate zombies weak enough to fall to a single Nightshade. Though already on the second day we get the flying seagull zombie that is fairly more tanky than the standard regular zombie. Fortunately, it only takes 2 shots to deal with it, and Nightshade has just barely enough time to hit it twice before it gets even. And at that, the first several days of Pirate Seas played pretty much how you would expect them to, with my Nightshades fighting against little armor. We were ironically actually doing better in the opening days than we were in ancient Egypt, due to no camel zombies that are basically bullet sinks for my Nightshades. Yeah, the pirate wooden bucket heads are annoying, but they don't show up in nearly that high of a number early game. There's definitely some heavy armor we will be facing soon though, but as for the first several days, we are pretty much able to shatter any attacks without issue. We were actually doing perfect so far without losing any mowers, though that quickly changed when the first barrel zombies started showing up, which ironically the shadow plants have an easy counter to on their side, but since I'm not using Dusklobber yet, they are essentially walking tanks for Nightshade. Fortunately, a single plant food is enough to bust up a single barrel, but once again we have to be careful, as the explosion also shoots imps into adjacent lanes. And with the barrel zombies added to the arsenal, armor on the zombie side was slowly ramping up more and more, but we are still largely able to just tough it out, seeing as how even without Moonflower, and being one of the weakest shadow plants, Nightshade is generally competent with his little shotgun attack. Though its main weakness of not being able to shoot long range without Moonflower will really be felt when the imp cannons start making themselves known. Once again, they can be dealt with using plant food, but it also makes them another resource sink, because if we don't break them, they explode all over my poop deck. And then we get to day 13, the first sun production mission in the game.
You and me, Ethan.
Being the first sun production mission, day 13 also gives me the perfect excuse to add the most important member to the team, being Moonflower, who with some level of power gritting, I am able to produce enough sun to get us past the first day of many sun production levels. Day 14, plan your defense. Well, Moonflower was short-lived. Anyways, it's another instance of me just spamming nightshades all along the map and hoping for the best. But I didn't even need to worry about it, as we just let the mowers deal with the barrel zombies in the end. Day 15, don't trample the flowers, and it gives you a free 3-peater, but largely just because my nightshades are actually capable of hitting something far away now was more than enough already. Day 16 was protect the endangered plants, but since being spreen is comically overpowered on private seas, plant fooding a few times basically does the entire day for you. And things were generally just going much better, as I no longer have to constantly dig up all my nightshades, now thanks to Moonflower. As for Moonflower itself, as stated earlier, not only does it produce sun, but it also powers up all shadow plants around itself. Alone, it has a pretty weak sun production, and it's really random in the way that it produces sun, but just like all shadow plants, the Moonflower can also be powered up, and when it does, it produces sun still randomly, but in significantly larger quantities, and hitting these bursts is enough to send us over the edge, as well as be more than enough to fund my Nightshade forces, who also can now reload their attacks as well as hit further enemies.
Here, love. Here's some shells. Here's a gun. Try reloading.
No.
Why not?
I just don't want to do it.
Come on, Reaper.
No.
Day 21, finish inside 5 zombies in 5 seconds, and sun requirements, so we just make 2 power grids of Moonflowers, and we have all the sun we need before the final wave, pretty easy. And then we get to the potential run killer, Day 22, with a swarm of imp cannons. Now, most people already know where this is going, but without any form of range, this is completely impossible to do with unpowered nightshades, so I'm not even going to bother making a bunch of attempts for it, and instead temporarily introduce our third member of the team, Dusklobber, with an AoE long-range burst catapult Geneva Convention violation attack, and enough sun to fill the entire boat. The day was done, moving right along. Day 23, I'm not going to add Dusklobber fully yet because it's so good, so we were back to just using Nightshade, and once again, it's not really any big deal because powered shadow plants ain't bad in the slightest. Day 24, protect the endangered plants, but once again, it's a spring bean during pirate seas, so the whole day is a I'm not endangered here, you are kind of day.
Call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
But with the only thing left to do was leak Dr. Zomboss's group chat on day 25, we were done with Pirate Seas, and I decided to call it here for this episode. With this whole challenge looking very optimistic so far, almost to the point to where it doesn't yet seem like that much of a challenge. Either way, I was looking forward to the next episode. Though, I'm also on the lookout now for ways to make this challenge more difficult, as right now it still seems a bit too easy. Let me know your thoughts on potential additional shadow plant combinations, or other ways I can make this challenge harder. But if you enjoyed this video and you want to see more like it, please leave me a comment down below telling me your thoughts as well as what you would like to see next, both Plants vs. Zombies and otherwise. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing as I upload new long-form content every week, as well as new shorts most every day encapsulating variety content, including challenges, guides, memes, audience participation, playthroughs, and even theories. Also, join the Discord with the link in the description as well as the pinned comment to become part of the show. But with that being said, thank you all again so much for watching, and big thank you to my channel and Patreon members, and I will see you all next time.